brother's past.
Who was he?
I can't remember.
Sometimes anger can help you survive.
The war has begun. Eric, what have you done?
Hey, what it do, y'all? Welcome back to the X-Men review series, where we're going to review every single X-Men franchise installment, all the way from the beginning in 2000's X-Men, all the way up into the latest, and I think probably the least greatest, New Mutants. We're going to cover all 13 installments in the X-Men franchise, and now we're going to be getting into part 2, baby. One of the best installments in the X-Men franchise. I don't give a damn what anybody says. We're talking about 2003's X-Men X2, X-Men United, X2, X-Men United. Yeah, I just mixed up the whole title, but I've never liked the X-Men United thing. But X2, baby, X2, we're getting right into it, man.
Mutants. Since the discovery of their existence, they have been regarded with fear, suspicion, often hatred. Across the planet, debate rages. Are mutants the next link in the evolutionary chain, or simply a new species of humanity fighting for their share of the world? Either way, it is an historical fact. Sharing the world has never been humanity's defining attribute.
And of course, the disgraced filmmaker himself, Bryan Singer, came back to direct this one. It's written by Zach Penn and David Hayter and Bryan Singer. Zach Penn is actually a new writer that they added to this one. They didn't bring back the other dude that helped write on the other one. So, yeah. And I don't think they had as many touch-ups with, like, the Christopher McQuarries or anything like that from any of the behind-the-scenes info that I did find. And that's the only bummer on this installment, unfortunately, for the review series. I didn't get as much behind-the-scenes information on X2 for whatever reason. You can't find as much, even though we're 21 years removed from it. So, hey, whatever. But we're going to kick this off like we did the last one and get into my overall experience and my introduction to X2. Now, by this point, I had seen the original X-Men on VHS in 2000. I had seen it at home, or 2001, whenever the hell it came out. I watched it at home, fell in love with the X-Men, and just kept watching the cartoons. I think X-Men Evolution came out around this time, so I kept watching that and started to read some comic books here and there when I could, but I could not wait. I was over the moon and excited for the sequel because it was confirmed. The first one was a huge success, so we were definitely getting into a sequel. Didn't know who was going to be in it. We didn't know about the Nightcrawlers and any of that stuff. I had no clue who the hell Stryker was. Hadn't read God Loves, Man Kills, any of that stuff. So I was going in completely blind to this one. Went to the theater with my dad to go see this when it was released on May 2nd, 2003. And for context of that, I would have been I was 8 years old. I would have been turning 9 later that year in November. So I was a 9-year-old, third grader or something like that, going to see the new X-Men sequel with my dad. After school, on the weekend, whatever the hell happened. Great to see Hugh Jackman back as Logan, of course. Great to see the great Charles Xavier, played by Sir Patrick Stewart. Everything picks up in the beginning of the film where we left off in the last one, with the great Patrick Stewart voiceover that we all know and love, giving us the expository dialogue that we all need, but is always flawlessly narrated by Mr. Patrick Stewart himself. And then we get right into the action, man. And we get one of the most kick-ass introduction scenes I ever had in my life. It was probably one of the first times in my life where I went and saw a film, and the first few minutes were so damn mind-blowing. My jaw was on the floor, and I just had to try to collect myself from there. I couldn't even get into the freaking story for like 10, 15 minutes because I was so fucking blown away by that opening scene. Nightcrawler was one of my favorite characters in Marvel vs. Capcom games and things like that. He was one of my favorite characters when they had him in the X-Men series. It was all aired out of order, so we didn't get to see the storylines in order like you spoiled Gen Zs get to do it on Disney+. I hadn't even seen those things in order till recently on Disney+. And I'm damn near 30 years old, so that's pretty crazy. But getting to see Nightcrawler in these video games and in the animated series, I always loved his teleportation abilities. Teleportation's always been my number one superpower that I've always wanted, especially as a guy that lives in the fucking worst place to drive ever, aka Southern California. And I hate driving in general, so I always could relate to that superpower. I always wanted it more than anything in the world. So Nightcrawler was my guy, and I just always identified with him as a misfit myself, someone that just felt like, I didn't fit in with anyone else. I just always related to Nightcrawler in that sense, and that was something that I just started to identify with as I got a little bit older with the X-Men. So all those themes really played well for me in the sequel. And the whole thing of diving into Logan's backstory. They didn't do that in the animated series. I hadn't read a single Weapon X comic, didn't even know what Weapon X was. So for me, this was the whole introduction to it, with Brian Cox as William Stryker getting to go toe-to-toe with Hugh Jackman's Logan, aka Wolverine, back and forth in this thing, and getting to see what that whole prejudice side of things was really about, and them really hammering that point home and really bringing it forward from the last film. And with me being 5 or 6 years old the first time I saw the other one, and with me being 9, almost 10 years old, getting close to double digits, I'm a little bit more mature than I was back then. Not really, I'm still an immature ass little kid, but I had a little bit of a better understanding of some of the subject matter that they were actually talking about. Me, being a young black kid, starting to understand that people are going to look at me a certain way depending on who you're talking about, but I live in a privileged time where I do have more freedom and more freedoms as a black kid in this country, and as a black person in this country. I can make something of myself because so many people paved the way before. And that whole Professor X, aka Martin Luther King, to the Magneto, aka Malcolm X dichotomy, and that whole dynamic from the comics and what the whole thing was about really made more sense to me. So I was really a lot more into the characters and into the story this time around when I went to watch the film. So it all played for me in a very real way. And getting to see the whole thing with Jean Grey suffering to control her powers, all these more complex storylines really played for me a lot better. And so just getting to see the whole sequence of them infiltrating the school and getting to see Colossus get to go all out, and Iceman get to actually use his powers, and Wolverine just going ham on fools in the freaking kitchen, where if you just added some bloodshed to that scene, it would have been a completely R-rated badass sequence. So I love how they didn't pull any punches with Wolverine more than what was actually necessary to necessitate a PG-13 at the time. Totally get it. And getting to see Logan and the Wolverine R-rated cut down the line kind of, made up for that back in the day. But just getting to see the ferocity of Logan in this film was so much more badass, man. And just the action was just top-notch. This, back in the day, was the best superhero sequel, bar none. We hadn't had Spider-Man 2 yet, and it was that was the big debate in the 2000s. It was between those two movies, and then The Dark Knight in 2008. It was those three battling for the supremacy of what was the best superhero sequel of all time. And to me, it's still a tough fight between those three. I have a hard time. I'm like, oh shit. Like, even right now thinking about it, I think I have a ranking, but I'm already switching my 2 for my 3. I think my number 1's definitive, but I won't reveal that here. But that's what I mean. It was part of that trifecta of the perfect superhero movie sequel. You know what I mean? Bigger action, better superhero costumes. Not necessarily the yellow and the blue and the, from what we know from this X-Men right here, but hey, close enough, right? And we've got more X-Men characters. Nightcrawler, for one. Lady Deathstrike, played by the great Kelly Yu. I think it's Kelly Yu. I'm going to go with Kelly Yu, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But the great Kelly Yu coming in as Lady Deathstrike, you know what I mean? Shawn Ashmore coming back as an actual supporting character as Iceman. It was really cool getting to see Iceman be a part of this, because he's always been a huge part of the original X-Men, and he's an Omega level mutant. He's a really powerful guy, so there was a lot of potential for his character to grow with the series as it went along. And getting to see Anna Paquin come back and get to do even more as Rogue, and Rebecca Romijn come back and get to do even more as Mystique, I thought was really cool. The Mystique special effects done even better and aged really well. 21 years removed. It doesn't look that janky like the original X-Men. So I will say they stepped up the visual effects a lot, and it was really cool, and it really stood the test of time and blew my mind with all the visuals that were going on, and the way that they were showing Professor X's powers was even cooler, and getting to see the way that there was just this and having Magneto team up with the X-Men and all that. I was like, oh man, the bad guys are teaming up with the good guys to go against the common threat. I've never seen this kind of thing before. So just the complexity of X-Men storytelling was so new to me at the time, and it really just is fun thinking back to that and remembering a time where all that was so new to us. And just getting to see superhero sequels done on a big scale like this back in that time was such a big deal. and done in a way where it had great visual effects, but great storytelling, but great fun, and awesome tie-in toys to go with it. So it was just a kid's dream back in 2003. And it really does still stand the test of time, in my opinion, as a great sequel in and of its own right. And I have so much love for it. God damn, just talking about this movie right now makes me want to go watch it again. I'm not even lying, man. I love this movie to death. But now let's transition into a little bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I was able to find on this movie before I get into my overall review / thoughts or criticisms or whatever the fuck you want to say on the movie. So, the main storyline of this film, with William Stryker wanting to use Professor X's abilities and getting revenge for his son not getting into the school and getting the help that he needed in order to get revenge on them and to target all mutants using one of the most powerful mutants' abilities against them, to me, super awesome. But they took all this idea and a lot of this stuff from the comic run in the Chris Claremont run in the earlier years of it, called God Loves, Man Kills. I actually have the trade paperback on that shelf over there, and it's a really, really well-written storyline. They took a lot of the essence of William Stryker being the main villain, a lot of the storyline of mutants and the whole political aspects of it, came straight from that comic material and that comic run, and the way that they're able to make it make sense for the Bryan Singer's version and able to carry over storylines and things from the last movie in a way that feels natural to the movie, but also pays respects to the comic book storyline and uses that to enhance his own stuff and to create a real X-Men story that feels genuine and really does incorporate everybody a little bit more evenly than they did in the first film, because it feels a lot more Wolverine-centric in that first X-Men, to me personally, than X2. X2 is kind of one of those few X-Men films that actually balances the overall ensemble the most. I would say the only other movies that really do that any better or just as good, I would say, is Days of Future Past from Bryan Singer once again, and I would say First Class from Matthew Vaughn. Those ones I would say have even better ensemble setups, I feel, for all the characters in a story writing way than this one. But this one set the table for those guys to be able to pick it up and do that later. And then X3, Last Stand, I like to say X3 for fun, but The Last Stand, I did think has some good team elements going on and some good mix of having a lot of the X-Men have something to do, even if it wasn't the best written storylines and written stuff all the time in X3, The Last Stand. I still think they were able to incorporate more characters as opposed to having it just be about Wolverine. So that was one thing that they really set up and kind of set the stage with here that they carried over there. And another really cool little casting what if is Ethan Embry was almost cast as Nightcrawler. That's right. The guy from Can't Hardly Wait at the time, the kid from Can't Hardly Wait who grew into the man that did The Devil's Candy on Netflix from a few years ago, go check that out if you haven't seen it already, has become an excellent actor in his own right, an excellent character actor. He was up for the read, but they just really loved what Peter Cummings or Alan Cummings did as Nightcrawler. And I forgot to mention his name earlier, man. That guy fucking killed it, but I'm going to get more into that in the review section, I guess. But Alan Cumming ended up getting the role. He was a great character actor in his own right and really just ran away and nailed it. So Ethan Embry, unfortunately, just missed out on this one. But it was definitely, I think, the better choice overall. But that's kind of it for if you don't know, now you know. So I don't really have anything else really to add to that section, guys, unfortunately. But now we can get into my overall review and my view of the film and how I see it. And overall, it's fucking awesome, dude. There's very few things in this movie I think that you could really change or do to enhance or improve the film. The only thing I thought that they could have actually dialed in more on was Nightcrawler's overall storyline and give him a little bit more of an arc in here. We do understand who he is as a character and what got him to that point a little bit, because his conversation and his interactions with Jean Grey and Storm during that second act and everything, or in the inciting incident of the first act, in a sense, and getting into the second act from there, they do a good job of having some interactions and some conversations with the characters to get a sense of who he is as a character and what makes him tick. But I do think they could have did a little bit more just to create an arc for him throughout the film a little bit more. Same thing with Storm. And I think Jean Grey, with the overall, her having issues with her powers and them kind of alluding to the Dark Phoenix storyline, I think they could have did a little bit more with those three characters to hammer that home more and to get that to be a little bit more of a prevalent piece of the movie. It's still there, but I think they could have upped the ante a little bit with that. And I also think that Scott Summers gets completely sidelined in this film once again. Scott Summers just gets fucked in the X-Men movie franchise, man. I gotta tell you, there is no love for Scott Summers in these things, dude. And it's no different here. So that's one element they definitely could have changed a lot. Yeah. other than that, I don't have any critiques, really anything negative to say. Rogue's even better in this movie. Logan, aka Wolverine's even better in this movie. The fight between him and Deathstrike is like Matrix 2000 action done right. It's freaking awesome. All the action scenes with Mystique are cranked up to 11 and even more badass than the first film, so that was cool. Magneto definitely gets to come in and have a few moments to shine. Getting to see the actual Blackbird in action much more in this second film, dodging missiles and going into stealth mode and all that stuff. And I cannot go through this review without mentioning my man, let me get his name right, make sure I got it here. My man, Aaron Stanford as Pyro. Such a great introduction to an X-Men character, aka villain as well, in such a great, phenomenal way. And the way that they were able to introduce him as a student of Professor Xavier in the opening scene, with him just being way too much of a hothead, pun intended, with that whole opening scene with those guys trying to bully him for his light to light their cigarette and whatnot, with him, Bobby, and Rogue when they're in the museum towards the beginning of the movie. And I thought that was just such a great way to set the table for all the characters, with Storm, Scott, and Jean looking over the kids, taking them on a field trip, them kind of interacting and mingling with humans and trying to blend in at the same time. It was just such a cool way of blending in these events, and with Nightcrawler's whole assassination attempt on the president just getting reported on literally while they're on the field trip, while they're out in the wild, when anything could go wrong, when the whole human versus mutant conflict is at an all-time high right now. Man, it's just so well done, dude. Like, Bryan Singer and co. really found a way to just up the stakes, make the action and everything just better. They were able to make this movie longer but still feel just as concise and well-paced. I absolutely love X2. It is still one of the greatest cinematic achievements in X-Men history, in my opinion. It's still one of the best sequels ever made, and it's definitely one of the best superhero sequels still ever made. And for my money, might just be the best superhero sequel of the 2000s, bar none. But I want to hear from y'all, man. What do you think about X2? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it's okay? Do you think it's overrated? Is it too dated for you? Do you love all the action scenes as much as I do? Do you love Nightcrawler, Alan Cummings' version, as much as I do? I want to hear from you in the comments down there below. I'm having such a blast with this review series for the X-Men movies. I love this series to death. It absolutely means the world to me. And I have so many fond memories of watching this with my friends and my family, and just different things that X-Men just means so much to me. And maybe it seems funny to some of y'all out there that aren't into the fandom world, but I would imagine if you're watching this video and stuck through to the end, you gotta be one of us. So I love and appreciate each and every one of you for watching. We're gonna have all these X-Men reviews coming at y'all. You're gonna have 3 to 4 of these X-Men reviews just about every month leading up to July 26th release of Deadpool and Wolverine hitting theaters. All 13 X-Men installments will be reviewed here for your viewing pleasure. So make sure you stay tuned next week for X-Men The Last Stand, and make sure you check out the original review we did for the first one, X-Men from 2000. I'm going to have that card right up here so you can check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Love you. Appreciate each and every one of you. Stay tuned. Don't sleep on any of the dopeness we got going on here on the channel. X2, baby. It's the shit. See you on the next one.